And he's not really Mr. Frank.
Thank
Okay,
you.
we are live,
I
and
can hear
we'll
it.
resume the budget study meeting. Cemetery.
Yes, thank you. Director Clausen will cover this.
There's only a couple things to point out on here. If you see there's part-time wages in cemetery and there were part-time wages in parks. DPW is dealing with the same thing as the other departments, trying to find qualified people. When you ask them to mow grass and be out in the hot sun, or they can be flipping burgers for more money, then it's tough to get seasonal people in. So as much as I don't like to use them, we're looking at some contractors to maybe mow the grass at the cemetery and some of the other areas so that we can free up bodies to do traditional DPW work per se. Other than that, most of it stays the same. One of the project costs in there is building maintenance on the 3 buildings we have over there, chapel and 2 storage barns, and some of the fencing along the outside edge. Is there any questions?
Any questions of Mr. Clausen or comments?
Besides the annual volunteering that we get to clean up the headstones and make sure that those are properly maintained, do we take any responsibility for that, either our people or our contractors?
Yeah, we do a spring cleanup, and we'll go around and identify headstones or foundations that have sunk or may have gotten caught by a mower or weed whip or something like that. We'll try to do some repairs there. And of course, we always respond if someone comes in and finds something, you know, so.
Okay. Any further comments or questions? Building and grounds.
Buildings and grounds is pretty much the same. That part-time wages is for the downtown person, and I think part of the wages for the cleaning person at the PD comes out of that. The other thing that you'll see for building and grounds are capital improvement, and that's the other buildings besides the police and fire buildings. That would be village offices that we do limited stuff there, DPW building, downtown bathroom, those kind of things.
Comments or questions on building and grounds?
I have a comment. The money that we're going to be obtaining, that $80,000 or $85,000 from the marijuana funds applications, could we not allot some of that money, like 50 grand, for sidewalks, upkeep and maintenance?
Yeah, I mean, so sidewalks
Improvements?
is, that's a great question. Sidewalks is something that we struggle with every year because we know that we want a walkable community, we want safe sidewalks, and we do try to basically in repair mode for the worst ones all the time, but there is some proactive type projects that we have on our books if money were to become available. The application fee for the marijuana licenses, we received about $85,000, which is non-refundable. If that's something that council wanted to program in, it would basically come from fund balance, but it would come from that $85,000. If council wanted to add $50,000 and earmark it for sidewalks, that is certainly something that council could do, and probably appreciated by the community, I would suspect.
Yeah, definitely.
I think
There's
that's a
more
great
and more
idea.
people out walking these days that I see already. And it just seems like that, if we have the funds, let's use them towards something that will help the community.
Okay, if I'm reading council correctly, a vote's not required, but if I'm reading council correctly, consensus is as we put the final review onto the budget, we can look at adding that into the final budget, and then it will be up for council's final approval. So you'll have one more time to talk about it, you know, if you change your mind. But if that's something council would like to see done, we can look at adding that to the budget as we finish it.
Thank you.
Further comments or questions on building and grounds? DPW, Mr. Clausen. Oh, I'm sorry. Lori, I'm sorry.
Finally got a comment.
Yeah.
Now, on the building and grounds, do you also look after the building that is down at Cyclone Park? The old
504.5? Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. All right, thank you.
DPW, Mr. Clausen.
DPW hasn't changed. My guys' wages are split out over several departments, so this would be one of them where you see full-time wages, part-time wages. We currently have an opening for a part-time position, so we're looking to fill that, and they assist with DPW regular work. One of the problems we're having is the Affordable Care Act is limited hours and stuff like that, so paying hours to attract a quality person also, has hindered us in the past and currently. Other than that, there's no major changes to the DPW budget.
So I was just going to say, so Brian talked about his employees and the trouble of finding actual employees. I think it's noteworthy to note that that is something, though, that the village will have to address, not in this budget, we're not requesting it, but in the future, as we've added full-time employees in other departments. The police department, one has been allocated for the village office. At one time, the DPW had over 10 employees. I think 12 was the number. Currently, including Brian, they have 6. And certainly our expectation for getting the work done, and I think the community's expectation has not diminished. So, I mean, that will be something, as we plan out into the future, and we are looking at this, at some point in the future, this or future councils will have to address that issue.
Yeah, Brian? Have you ever thought of providing incentives for other employees to make referrals, such as like a $500 or $600 bonus if you refer someone to us and we do in fact hire them? That's done in the private sector all the time.
Yeah, I don't know the legalities of it, but hearing Chief McGee talk about some of the incentives for taking things off of his plate and moving things forward, I think that's a great idea, and some of those things could probably move forward at the DPW and offer incentives. I know, I always tell my guys, we don't make widgets, so when widgets are high, we can't go out and make more widgets to increase profits. So we provide a service. My guys have done a great job in the past of providing that service. The community has gotten used to the service that we provide, so we're going to try to continue that, and whether we do it in-house or with contractors. So.
Right.
Mr.
Hey, Brian, are you going to be planning on hiring part-time people like they did in the past?
Yeah, right now we have an ad out for a full-time person to replace someone that just left, a permanent part-time person, and 2 seasonals.
Didn't they used to hire part-time people in the summertime?
Yeah,
that's everything?
That's our seasonal employees that we hire to mow grass. But like I said, we're currently at between $14 and $14.50 an hour to hire seasonals. We're paying more than the landscape company across the street, and we're just not getting applications. When they can go down and make $15 to $18 an hour working at a fast food restaurant. So.
Oh, okay.
Have you tried advertising on Michigan Works?
We haven't. We've used the local paper. In the past, we've used Michigan Municipal League for a full-time position. So I know this is a common occurrence. I talked with other DPW directors in the area, and they've gotten all the way up to $15, $16 an hour for a seasonal help, but haven't been able to get anybody to apply. I think it's just a sign of the times in the workforce.
Yeah, I have factories even in the area that are joining the chamber just in order to advertise positions, and some of them are trying to fill 20 and 30 line positions, and they get 2 or 3 applicants. So it's a challenge right now.
It's unfortunate because, like I said, the service level has been great, and we hope to still provide that, but it gets tougher and tougher with fewer personnel. So.
Further comments or questions?
Well, you guys do a great job.
Thank you.
Major roads?
Major roads, once again, it's split up into 4 departments or 4 divisions. Street maintenance is your surface areas, winter maintenance is snow and ice, traffic are your signs, and trees are, the trees that are in the right of way. We use a contractor that comes in once a year to do trimming and removal, and we assist them in doing that, and then we do the stump removal and stuff, so we're able to save some money there. The contractor we've used for at least 15 or 18 years here, and he provides us with a great cost. There's no major changes there, except if you look at street maintenance, we budgeted $80,000, and we're looking at some options on College Street, and I've talked to a contractor about fixing some drainage issues on North Street. So.
Brian,
Yes.
is Apollo Drive part of the village, or is that part of the trailer park?
It's a private drive, and I believe it's owned by the Holly Foods Plaza. There's been discussion, I've had some emails back and forth about who's in charge of maintenance, if there's a maintenance agreement. I'm not aware of a maintenance agreement between any of the businesses on the Apollo. Apollo Drive comes around and off of Grange Hall and comes back out onto North Holly. I know that the plaza owner did some work on the part by McDonald's that comes out onto North Holly, but there's now complaints about the section that comes off of Grange Hall. So
Yeah.
I think Jeremy Watson and myself will still be, and Jerry Walker probably be in further discussions to try to get some of that remedied.
So, and I've spoken with the new owners of the Holly Foods Plaza, and I mean, there are people who are willing to invest in the community, and I think we see some positive changes. Them along with the new owners of Holly Foods. I mean, they're both doing a great job up there. But I've talked with them about the idea of the village would be willing to entertain a proposal if they were to bring Apollo Drive up to standards, that the village would entertain the thought of taking that road in. And then that would relieve them from any future obligations for maintenance, for plowing, for all of that. And I think that would be the best way to serve the users of that street long-term. But it's a substantial investment upfront, but it would relieve them of any future obligations. So I think they are considering that. I think just with all the other money they've been putting into the complex right now, they're not ready to make that move. But I mean, Brian and I, we think that that would be the route to go in the future if they're willing to make that upfront investment. And as far as current work on major roads, before we go off roads, is Brian is working on a process, and you'll see it in your next council agenda in May, a chip sealing proposal for Broad Street, basically from Waterworks Park to the railroad tracks at the police station. If you've driven down that stretch of road, it can loosen some fillings on you. So they do a good job. They do, yeah. I mean, so they do a good job of repairing it, but it's a constant process each time to have that road fixed. It's not going to be a complete removal or replacement. It's a chip seal process, but it'll be very effective for several years. And so we're looking at doing that in addition to our next immediate thoughts of College Street, as Brian said, North Street, and then Sherwood Court. So that's kind of our pecking order in case somebody in the community were to ask you.
So if you're talking about that, then we have significant issues right out here.
That's not, the unfortunate thing is that's not a village street.
This is a school district street.
Actually, the village's Act 51 money ends at that stop sign. It doesn't pick up until this stop sign. Years ago, this was a driveway or school entrance area, and then over time, when this building didn't get used, it just turned into a thoroughfare for people.
How about the section on Sherman right over here?
That's ours.
Okay, because
Yeah.
that's pretty deteriorated at this point.
In Sherman, at one time, as my understanding, there was a large hill. Sherman came up and they cut it out, and when they did that, they didn't move any of the utilities down, so the water main is, that's one of our $1 million water mains. There's probably about 50 stainless steel repair clamps along that water main, and it's only about waist deep, and it's only 4 to 6 inches in places of water main. So for us to redo that is a major investment in terms of infrastructure.
That's another
Yeah.
Saginaw Street scenario.
Don't mention that.
Not quality-wise, but project. Depth of
Yeah,
project.
we're gonna do Saginaw Street again.
More to come on that. More to come.
Well, I would hope that the Saginaw Street project is being reviewed yet.
Yes, we have met with the engineers and MDOT, and we have a meeting set up the first week of May with the contractor to get some of the problems remedied before the full-blown construction season gets on and we're put on the back burner.
Yeah. Is the stoplight getting changed?
So that ball is in Oakland County's court, so it is equipped to be a smart signal, but Oakland County, they're not quite ready to do that yet. We will keep working with them on that because we want it fixed also.
I get stopped there every single time, and I'm like, I'm ready to take my camera out, start taking pictures, and go, I thought this was changing.
Mm.
As long as you don't send them to the manager, that's fine.
I'll send them to you so that you can forward them on to the county.
Before we move on from this, I think I heard this right. This department is the department that handles tree trimming and removal.
Major and local roads together.
Major and local together, yeah. Kind of a comment with a question. I have a resident, actually she's my neighbor, who had a tree from the easeway fall onto her property. Terrible damage. One car totaled. Severe damage to her porch and the side of her house. One thing that she was requesting of the village was that we cover the $1,000 deductible for her homeowner's insurance. Now, I'm not sure of the legalities of that per se, but I'm wondering if that's something that we can consider budgeting for, if that's something that we can do, because it's a relatively rare occurrence, right, that, a tree that's our responsibility, falls onto somebody's property and causes a whole bunch of damage, but it sure would mean a lot to the resident in that situation.
Well, I'm familiar with the situation you're talking about, and
Yeah.
I believe she was asking for a little bit more than just $1,000.
Uh-huh.
And we consider, the village's policy is that's an act of God. We go around and do a preliminary list and, for the season to take down trees and stuff like that. She did complain about the trees to the north of her. We went out and inspected those. They were put on a removal list. They were removed.
Mm-hmm.
The tree that we looked at, the rule of thumb is if it's got green foliage on it, I don't see any signs of, large decay or I call it frass at the bottom where it's been infested with ants. We try to leave it. We're a Tree City, USA. We do have, in your area especially, a lot of older trees.
Right.
So for every person that wants a tree removed, there's a person that, I get a phone call that says, why did you remove that great healthy tree? So it's a balancing act that we try to take care of. We take all complaints seriously. We do go out, take a look at them. We try to trim them up so that the wind goes through them instead of, breaking them up and stuff like that. So, and then if we do have the unfortunate, incident where one does fall or damages, we go out, take a look at it. We've even called in our tree arbor, outside arborists to take a look at it and say, it was a healthy tree. Unfortunately, that limb, based on the storm or the wind, broke off and caused damage. So,
and we did turn that claim over to MMRMA, our insurance provider for the village, and with the same rationale, they denied coverage for that. I mean, while I think it's a good thought, I think it's a dangerous precedent to begin. If it's something that the insurance company says shouldn't be covered or can't be covered by policy, to then just open up your checkbook, because who do you say no to in the future and how much? So so we're pretty comfortable with guidance from our attorney and our risk provider in the policy that we have. But again, council discretion, but that's the approach that we have taken on it. Try and treat everybody exactly the same.
And if you deny one, then you set yourself up for liability too. Them going to court, well, they paid someone else's and didn't pay mine.
Sounds like an equal protection argument there,
Yeah.
Brian, Elm considered a major road?
Yes.
You guys have called consumers.
Yes.
I've called consumers many times. I talked to the contractors on site at the building across the street from my house the other day. That pole across from DPW is going to come down.
Oh, yeah, we watched it the other day do some...
It was doing this.
Yes.
And I called consumers again. I said, why don't you fix it now when it's not an emergency? You're going to be out.
Yeah.
Who becomes,
It's
if
a
somebody's injured and that
consumers,
pole
the
falls?
villages covered themselves in terms of liability. We've made several phone calls to them and reported it.
Okay.
Their fix was to come out and put a 1-inch rope on it and tie it
They
up.
tied a rope to a pine tree. That's how they fixed the pole. They tied a rope on it.
So when the pole goes down, the tree goes
The
with
tree's
it.
going with it, and it's
Yeah.
gonna crash into
You oughta see it.
DPW, and it's got two transporters on
unbelievable.
it that are gonna go boom.
Yeah,
You know,
it's-
if we weren't grabbing so many drunk
Yeah.
drivers, we're only one drunk away from bringing that pole down. My apologies.
Get on it, Jerry.
But it's the property of the utility company, right? So-
Right, yeah, I mean, and we don't have the resources to
Right.
do anything. I mean,
Oh, I know, I understand.
I,
I'm
why,
just saying
I don't know why they're ignoring it.
We've covered our behind though.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And go
I
back to
even went over to
trees if you,
Steve, too.
if you,
I've called them twice myself and talked to their bosses, and they said, yep, we'll take care of it.
and we've had crews out there that come out and look at it and then they drive away, so.
Yeah, they were out there the other day. They looked at it and drove away.
But if we
I'd,
get
I'd be
back-
really worried if they left in a hurry. Then it'd be-
It was a pretty windy day. They left pretty quick.
yeah.
But if you look at the tree budget for both local and major roads, it's right around $50,000. So to go back to what Councilman Delaney brought up, and we don't have a huge budget, so if we were to start compensating people for some of these things, I guess with less work that could be done on trying to preserve these trees and trim them up and make them safe as we go along, so.
Any further discussion on major roads or questions? Local roads, anything to add, Brian?
Nope, very similar to major and the same broken up into the same different categories. So.
Questions of Mr. Clausen regarding local roads? Sewer.
Yeah, so Brian will talk primarily on this. I just want to point out that pursuant to our rate study and prior formal rate study, which the village paid for with Plant Moran, we have included a 2% increase on the commodity rate. So that would be the use rate. So that only generates an additional $36,533. So it's not like the village is increasing by hundreds of thousands of dollars. It creates an additional $36,000. That's enough as you look at the appropriations or the expenditure end to just keep that a in and out type budget. And really, that's what enterprise funds are supposed to be in and out. I mean, we do have some general maintenance things and preparing for the future as far as a fund balance, but even that fund balance, while it is getting better, it is increasing, it's still not to where it should be by industry standards, so we're still working in that. But I just want council to know that we do have that 2% built in there in both the sewer and the water side. We are proposing no increase on the debt service charge. And as you know, we have just a few years, thankfully, on that debt service charge for those bonds that were taken out in the early to mid 2000s. That's at $37.05. Brian and I and Debbie have been working with Roe because there has been a lot of public sentiment or comment about the quality of Holly water. I mean, the water is kind of what it is. I mean, it's a deep well water. You know, we don't manufacture the water, we draw it out of the ground. We treat it for certain things, and Brian will talk about that, arsenic basically, but the water is not softened by any means. We think softeners are part of the answer. If every resident were to have a quality softener, that would improve the quality of the water that each individual household gets, but in some cases that's not possible. In some cases it's a choice. It's not desired. One option that a lot of people have asked us about is, why doesn't the village treat the water and soften it before it's delivered? And that's an option. We have asked Roe to provide us with some different options, technology options, to accomplish that, softening the water. That is something that we would not propose while we have this current bond on, because it's going to be expensive. It's probably $5 to $8 million. But if you do away with the current bond and you were to bond for that, that might be an option for the community. We think additionally, and sometime before the end of this calendar year, that we may be able to have those options together and give them to council, and perhaps the route, something for you all to think about, is for council to put this on the 2024 ballot and say, okay, community, this is the situation, your current debt service charge bond is going away. It will never go to zero because there are some other improvements that have to be done at the water and sewer plants, just like at our own houses. After things are 25 years old, there are upgrades or replacements that need to occur. So it's never going to go away, but maybe we decide as a community that we want to bond to soften the water before delivery. But that's something that if council chose to go this route, that the community could decide on their own. And if they decided no, fine, we would continue delivery in the same method we are. It would be individual household responsibility to choose what you want to do with the water coming into your house, or the community as a whole could decide we want softened and treated water, just like the city of Detroit or wherever else. What other communities do that? So just an option in the future, but Brian can talk about this budget specifically.
Does Detroit's is Great Lakes water.
Great Lakes water, yes.
Do they treat it? Do they soften it?
I think they probably treat it a little more. I don't know that they do a complete softening process on it.
I'm not aware of a community that does,
So,
but I don't know.
oh, no, there definitely are communities that soften their
Davison
water.
does reverse osmosis. Chelsea has a reverse osmosis system. But they're
And that's what you're talking about in terms of
Yeah, City of Fenton has lime softening, but with that comes challenges. I mean, Fenton would love to have our water. We talk to their water department all the time. They have 2 shallow wells and 2 deep wells, so when they switch between their shallow wells and their deep wells, they run into treatment issues because it's 2 different qualities of water. So when they start mixing those together, it causes a nightmare for the operators at the plant. Our biggest issue here in Holly is the calcium in the water. It's the white particles everybody complains about. For a normal, healthy person, it's not a big deal. To small appliances, ice makers, washing machines, dishwashers, those kind of things, it wreaks havoc on them. We recommend a softener system for, homeowners, and like Jerry said, there's a large cost for the initial setup, and then there's a continued maintenance cost. If we go with reverse osmosis filter systems, like I said, Davison had, I was familiar with it. There's about 50 filters in a skid at about $5,000 a pop. So, depending on your quality of water and how often you have to change those filters, there's a substantial cost in maintenance.
I know of large users that have their own system because they're serving food and cooking food, and they feel it's worth the investment to have that sophisticated softening system. I have a softener in my house, but you still get some calcium in it anyway, So, and it's not cheap. There's an initial cost, and then there's
There's salt or
Right.
alternate chemical,
Right.
depending on the type of softener system you use.
It does help with your appliances, though.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. So our water is tested every single day, 365 days a year. Our water department tests our water as far as quality, and it's reflected in our consumer reports as far as water quality. And so there is no issue with the safeness of the water. I mean, there's some discoloration from time to time, more frequently than we would like, generally caused by some disruption or vibration of those water mains, whether it's through construction or other causes. So there is that, water softeners would help, but again, I think if council chose that route, a community decision could be a route that you could look at.
Yeah, the discoloration, in my experience, is that's when there's some construction disruption, and then I've been given notices of it. It shows up at my office because I don't have any filter there, but and it doesn't show up next door to my office because they have a rather sophisticated system there. So, choice to be made by the community, I guess.
So other than that, I mean, the budget is relatively the same. At the end of the day, $91,000 increase in the budget at the end of the day, but I mean, it's all for project costs and increases in labor and related costs. But the 2% increase, like I said, generates only $36,000, so it doesn't cover the increase in the budget, but we're able to absorb that in other ways.
The only thing that I would add is sewer is broken into 2 departments. You have the collection system, which includes the 13 lift stations and all the lines that get it to the plant. And then you have the actual wastewater treatment plant itself. There's currently a superintendent and 3 operators at the plant. The previous director was able to automate a lot of that plant so that instead of being a 24/7 operation, we have 4 guys that work during daytime shift. And if there's any problems, we have an alarm system set up that sends alarms out to these guys and let them know that there's an issue. Because the automated system, they're able to address it most of the time over the phone without having to come in, and the plant, runs, those other 16 hours in an automated state. And then we have, at the plant, we're looking at upgrading some of that automated system. There's PLCs that are in there that are obsolete now, that the only way you can get them is to buy them off of Amazon, which I don't think is a really safe way to buy them. You take a lot of chances with that, so we're looking at upgrading them to modern capabilities or current day capabilities, which will allow us to change cards in them, and I won't get into all that because it gets way over my head real quick, but luckily there's experts out there that can make it so that the layperson can run the system and then we can make it work.
Did you mention something in the council meeting? You just recently requested to have a lift station repaired.
Yes, that's the Apollo Street lift station. That's the one the village bought for $1. I think the person ran all the way to the bank with that $1. Best investment he had. But we're replacing the rail system so that we can get the current pumps out of there for their annual maintenance, and then limp that one along until we, as part of our SAW grant several years ago, Roe did an assessment of the lift stations, and probably over half of the ones need to be replaced. But some of the council was on, and just for the ones that weren't, we replaced a smaller lift station over on Bear Street at a tune of about $350,000. So that's probably the starting price and goes up from there.
So are any of those, are you looking at a schedule on any of those?
That's part of our asset management plan. So as we get this one back online, then we'll start to address those issues. We've done some capital improvements at the plant. We replaced the grid separator and we put in a bar screen, which that has already paid for itself in about 1.5 years, 2 years times in terms of downtime and pump repairs and manpower of cleaning out pumps and that kind of stuff. So.
Any further questions or comments on the sewer recommendation? Water.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. As I stated before, we have built in, as recommended by Plant Moran and through our own independent study, the 2% increase. And again, just by way of information, that increase will only generate $22,066 of additional revenue. Again, our costs just going up, if you figure inflation, are going to be well above that number. But just so you know, this 2% increase is something that people don't like, but it doesn't cover the needs for the increase, but there is a need to increase every year. So we think it's a modest increase, but it covers it. One correction or clarification I want to make, if you look on the revenue page, which is the very first page under delinquent water revenue taxes, that's line 445. If you go all the way over to the right, the recommended budget, we have $80,000 in there. That's a typo. So it should be $8,000. But just in case you have trouble sleeping tonight and you're reading over these numbers, I don't want that to stick out to you. Other than that, Brian, I don't know if you have anything additional.
Just on some of the projects. Eagle came through and did a sanitary inspection, they call it, on our water system. And then last year, council approved for our 3 water towers to be inspected. They came back with a whole list of things that have to be addressed to keep us Eagle compliant. So if you'll see, there's in repairs and maintenance, there's an increase, and in project costs, there's an increase, and that's to meet some of those requirements that Eagles has on us for our water towers and our system.
Comments or questions on the water proposal? General fund.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. So this is the general fund that includes the departments that are paid out of it, including the village council. So we'll start right there. With the village council, that budget is relatively the same as last year. The only item that we decreased in it was the training line. Now, that can always be adjusted in the future. We adjusted it because basically it was not used. I think one member was able to attend training over this last fiscal year. But there's some excellent training out there. So if that's something that council would like in the future, like I said, we can always amend that line and look at that. The next department, 172, is the village manager's line. That's my budget for my position. It's the same also, except line 811. I previously have been a member of ICMA, the International City Managers Association. I do not see myself participating this year in that. It's an $800 membership, and so I removed that from the budget so that those funds could be allocated in other places. The next two, attorney and data processing, they are virtually the same. We are in contract negotiations right now with the labor attorney involving the police officers, the police command, as well as the Teamsters. We look to have that resolved during this fiscal year, and so that's why we reduced that line for next year, because we don't anticipate, we know we won't have any contract negotiations during that time, so the only issues would be any type of contract issues or clarifications in that area. Department 260 is the clerk treasurer. And again, that's one of the budgets. It is Debbie's budget, but I'll speak for her. She likes that best when I do that. No, only because she's typing. So relatively no changes. One thing that she is in the process of doing, which I think is going to be a huge benefit to the village and to herself, of filling that deputy finance director's position in that office next to her. So that's a very needed position, not only for workload, but for accounting practice, to have that balance in there. So there have been absolutely zero issues, no problems, but I think it's expected that the village would have that position, any municipality would have that position filled, and again, we'll be able to remove some workload from her desk, so she can then, well, we'll just replace workload. So she then can accomplish other things that she's tasked with. Clerk treasurer has huge responsibility with any municipality, and so she's looking at filling that, which I think is a good thing. And so overall increase for the entire clerk treasurer budget 260 is just under $20,000. Next budget, Department 371, that's community development. That's virtually unchanged. And you can see from that, that's more of a business account where we deal with professional services, plan review, commissioner training, membership, CDBG expenses, and printing and publication. So that increased by just over $1,000, and that's where that is. Non-departmental, that's another one of those business type function accounts. You can see she actually decreased projected spending for next fiscal year by some $5,000. And so that's where we're at with that. Would you have any questions regarding any of those areas?
Any comments or questions? I have a comment. It was suggested one time at a meeting that the village was allowing liquor businesses because of the revenues we get from the liquor permits. And I don't know whose idea that was, but we don't make a lot of money on liquor permits.
We do not. I'm looking for that on the,
It's,
on the revenue page as you
Yeah,
speak.
it's, someone made that argument, but I don't think it rings true, so.
Basically,
know-
like a rental.
I'll comment to that. As little as 5, 6, 7 years ago, municipalities had more say-so as to the issuance of those liquor licenses. In fact, if somebody came in, much like the marijuana licenses, they came through the police department, and we had to fingerprint them, look into their background, their financials. All that was taken away, and I get it. There were departments out there charging megabucks for those background checks, and so the liquor owners complained, and the stores and their lobbyists. So that was taken away. So a community really doesn't have much notice on those liquor licenses.
And the fees are promulgated by the state.
The fees are static.
Right.
They come to us from the state. We have no local control on that. And you almost have no local control on the issuance of the license, other than you get notice of it. And even on the renewal process, there's a lot of steps to even go in and challenge an annual renewal. I think they're in March every year, if you have a problem child. Royal Oak went through this a few years ago, and they took a lot of heat on it, but they were trying to do the right thing, so it's out of your hands. It is.
So whosever idea that was, you gotta work harder on this. you know?
So the projected revenue, what we projected from liquor permits is $8,000.
Right.
So you're not gonna pay many expenses with $8,000. I mean, we have budgeted, as long as we're talking about revenues, and before we start the next department, we have budgeted for 2 additional marijuana licenses, whether we get them or not, after the 2 that you're considering now. Next year, who knows? We have had a couple of phone calls asking about when grow permits are going to be considered, or licenses. My response was, you should have already applied, because it was open for all of them. But they didn't, and really, some of the consultants for some of the retail applicants said, nobody's going to apply for any other license until these 2 retail licenses are filled. So it is kind of following that trend, but we budgeted only for 2 additional licenses next year, and so we're not counting on liquor revenue, cannabis revenue to float the village by any means. But we do think there is going to be some there, but it's going to be minimal at best.
Any further comments or questions regarding general fund?
I think this sort of touches on the, general fund revenue. Have we applied, or are we in the process of applying, or thinking of applying for a certified local government status?
So we are working on that process. Actually, Nicole Rankin is assisting us with that, and Nick has been working on that process, or at least discussing with Nicole the status. And so we have submitted some documentation to the state, and so we have some more to submit. I mean, that would be helpful in the fact that there are some grants, although there are always strings attached to grants, matching funds or whatever. So it's not like it's a salvation to any type of financial issue, but it is attractive. It's probably more attractive to developers who would look to come into a community. Fortunately, right now, while we do want to get that CLG status, we have no shortage of developers looking at the village. I think it's been a long time coming, and so we're very fortunate to be in that situation right now.
Further comments or questions?
We're probably, until we have some established things, not going to see like the, I don't know if the term's revenue sharing or what, from the marijuana taxes.
Well, yeah, they have to be established licenses. And so I think, and Chief Narsha might have a precise number, but for this year, communities who had marijuana licenses issued, they received in the neighborhood of $58,000 per license. So if our 2 licenses that council will be considering were already listed, we would have received, a little over $100,000 for those 2 licenses, but nothing yet. So next year, I mean, I think it's feasible to expect something.
And renewals, though, those 2, when we approve 2, they have to renew next year for another $5,000.
That's correct.
So,
In the industry, to comment on that, the industry projection is that next year will be much higher than this. Did I use the word high? It'll be much larger than this year. And the 57 was double what it was last year. So the first year, it was $25,000. This year, it was 57 and some change, and they're anticipating a greater number next year. And that's the advantage of having, like, if you had the testing facilities, and throughout this process, we've learned some things, and we've learned that they aren't as often, found in local communities as we could. But, I mean, it's a building this size. You're going to get the same amount whether you got a 10-acre grow or a small testing facility. So it's per license. So if we're lucky enough to capture some of those or transport, which doesn't take much space, we're going to get that same return back.
And that's
So we'll see,
basically-
but we have not built a budget dependent upon
Right.
revenue from those sources. But we know there is going to be some. We just haven't built it with that. I have just two more small departments to cover, lake improvement and then refuse. And then after that, if you'd like, I'll run through the revenues real quick. And Holly Area Transportation, just so you have an idea of revenue-wise where we're at.
Go right ahead.
So lake improvement, that's treatment of the mill pond. And so that is one of those accounts where we collect basically just enough in order to pay for whatever the treatment is, and that's done by special assessment for each of the property owners around the mill pond, and it's measured by linear foot along the waterfront. The village is the largest property owner along the mill pond, just by virtue of all the small pieces.
Riparian owners in the village, not Rose Township.
In the village,
Yeah.
that's absolutely correct. Yeah, so a lot of it's in Rose Township. We receive nothing
No.
from that. So that is collected by special assessment, though, so that is really not out of the general fund, with the exception of the portion that the village pays. And again, we are the largest payer of that. We have looked in the past, and we will revisit it again. There are lots of small slivers of land. I think that can be turned over to adjacent property owners, and we will look at doing that. There's just no reason for the village to own it. And not just because of the expense, because each individually, those are little expenses, but there's just no reason for the village to own it. We think the property owners will have some interest. So we will be looking at that in the future. But $5,600 is the budget for that. Next is refuse. So refuse is an area that, I don't know, almost less than a year ago, I guess, had lots of discussion because the service, quite frankly, was not very good. And for a lot of reasons. We think that it has returned. We have a few years left on our contract with the Republic. And so at this current time, staff looks at fulfilling that contract and staying with it. It's quite an arduous process to break the contract, although it can be done, and other communities have done it. But we look at keeping it. So there has not been an increase in the refuse rate for the individual household since 2018. And some of that had to do with the difficult period during the COVID. But we have realized increases each year in our contract with Republic, as well as in the contract, and this is the same with every company, a fuel recovery cost. So as they pay more for fuel, we pay more for fuel. And so we know that. We have built into the rate for council to consider a 2% increase. I mean, basically what that will do is that will move the cost of refuse to $200 per year per household. And so, I mean, we think that's still a very good rate. I mean, if you were to live in a community that does not have single hauler status and pay individually for your refuse, I'm pretty confident you're going to pay more than $200 per year. So we have built that in there, and with building that in, again, that raises $19,510 in additional revenue. So it's It's not like we're raising a great deal of money, but it raises enough in order to keep us with a balanced budget in the refuse area.
Comments or questions? Mr. Walker? Transportation?
Transportation. And so transportation, of course, is our senior services that we provide. We have projected no large projects in that budget and relatively the same. I will say, just so the council is aware, we have been contacted by WOTA, which is West Oakland Transportation Authority. They service right now Highland Township, White Lake Township, Commerce Township, Waterford Township, the village of Wolverine Lake, Melford, maybe not Melford, and the city of Walled Lake. The advantage to going into discussions with them is right now our transportation system covers a 10-mile radius of the village, which gets you into Fenton, gets you into Grand Blanc, gets you to the McLaren Hospital Emergency Center on Sashbaugh and Clarkston, but does not get you any farther than that. If we were to partner with WOTA, then you would have access from we believe we have to, that's why we have to meet with them. We have to confirm the areas of Grand Blanc and Fenton. But you would have access then from Holly all the way into West Bloomfield, into the Henry Ford system. But you'd have access to the city of Pontiac, the St. Joe Hospital or McLaren Hospital in Pontiac, as well as all those other areas. So we don't know where that's going to go, but just in the event that council hears something that we are talking with them, we are talking with them. We are going to meet with them to find out what our options. After we meet with them, we may find out that that's not a good option for the village. And certainly if it didn't service Grand Blanc and Fenton, it would be a non-starter because the majority of our rides go to those areas. And so we are meeting with them. But for this year, we have the budget that's in front of you, and that's the budget that we are proposing. So that's all I have in the area of expenditures. Again, getting back to revenues, we know that there has been an increase in the housing market. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending upon how you look at it, the amount of increase that a municipality can receive from the rise in taxable value is limited by Proposition A. And I suppose it's not a bad thing, but as we've talked before, Proposition A partnered with Headley is a negative effect for municipalities, but it's got nothing to do with it. But we are going to see an increase. We see that increase being less than $70,000 per year, probably somewhere between 50 and 70. I mean, we'll see exactly what it is. As you go through the revenues, we've talked already about liquor permits. We've talked about marijuana licenses. We see some increase in the area of fines and costs through the courts. A lot of that, well, almost all has to do with the police department. So you know what, they are at full staff now. They're doing an excellent job. Tickets are up, but not tremendously. Drunk drivings are up tremendously. They've gone from 5 or 6 a year to 50 a year. And so they've gone up tremendously. So we don't arrest drunk drivers for that reason, but a byproduct of that is going to be fines, cost, and cost recovery from the police department. Because if a person is arrested for drunk driving, individual property owners should not have to pay for the prosecution of that person. That person who got arrested should take responsibility for any costs that they generate. And so we're recovering that. So we are projecting an increase in our revenue from last year, but it's in line with the appropriations or the expenditures that we've requested for this year. In fact, we're going to, as it is on paper right now, we project an $11,000 or $12,000 increased position of revenue over expenditures. So it's not like we have a tremendous amount. So I know there was some discussion about should we give parks more? We would love to give parks more. But when you're only talking $11,000 or $12,000 in the difference, you know, maybe we don't have it right now. But with some other things that change, you know, maybe the special assessment millage will free up some more general fund money. Perhaps the government will pass along some additional ARPA funds, which, as they are going to do in the police department, you know, we're able to use those for needed items, but would free up other general fund money to do other things. So we look at the budget, Debbie looks at the budget every single day. We as a staff, that we examine the budget every day to see how best we can move the monies, and we reprogram them. Once council approves it, we reprogram within the confines of our budget to how we can best serve the community. And so we look at doing that. Of course, if there's things that's going to go over budget, by law, those come back to council for consideration. Absent of emergency expenditures, which we do make, but then that comes back to council as far as notification. So, I mean, we're very appreciative of the community. We're appreciative of our budget. We think we do a good job. And the package you have before you, like I said, will be virtually the same package with some minor adjustments as we get a better handle on expenditures and revenues as we close out this year. And that's all that we have from a staff perspective.
Any comments? I'm not going to go through the roster for comments, but any comments or questions? Oh, Lori, yes.
With the COVID, since they had, where you didn't have to pay your water bill and stuff like that, now they have lifted that. Has more people been starting to pay down on their water bill? Because that would help relieve some of the.
We've set up a lot of payment plans because the ones that weren't paying had really big balances. So we allowed them to set up payment plans where they're paying their current bill plus whatever they could afford each month. You know, some of them are only $25 extra. So it's going to be a while, but we do have them all set up on payment plans. Everybody that couldn't pay.
Yeah, so actually, that's an excellent question, Lori. But I think one thing, I know council realizes this, but for people who may be tuning in via YouTube, is even when those back water funds are collected, water and sewer funds, they can only be used within those departments. And so those are built into already the water and sewer department. It's not like we can take, you know, somebody paid $10,000, and that's a high bill, but somebody paid $10,000 the water bill, so we're going to put it in the sidewalks. That cannot occur. It stays within the individual departments as an enterprise fund.
Any further questions or comments by council members? Nothing further, Lori? If there's no objection, then we're adjourned. We won't deliberate towards any more decisions, but we will have pizza, right?
Perfect.
Is the game over, Ryan?
No,
What's that?
I don't think they even started.
Oh.
So
Doubleheader.
I think they were scheduled.
The Tigers